My name is Carlton Cartwright. I'm the Executive Director of Veterans Memorial and Multicultural Histories Incorporated. And sir, today is Sunday, October 9th, 2022. We are at Lake Ashton. And sir, what is your name?
John Straws.
John, and what city do you live in?
Winter Haven.
Winter Haven, okay. And what year did you go into the military?
1970.
What were you doing prior to going into the military?
High school.
Okay, you said you were in high school?
Yes.
And you graduated, I'm sure,
Yes.
prior to going into service.
Yes.
Any college before you went into the military? No?
No.
Okay. And where were you living at that time?
Tucson, Arizona.
Uh-huh. Okay. Let's try that one more time. So you were in high school in Tucson?
Yes.
And what high school was that?
Rincon High School.
All right, so you went into the Navy immediately after high school?
Yes, because I was going to be drafted.
Oh, okay. So, why did you choose the Navy?
My family's all Navy. I have 4 uncles that were in the Navy in World War II. And myself and 4 other cousins all went Navy.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
our family history's Navy.
All right. Where was basic training?
San Diego.
San Diego. How long was that basic training?
13 weeks.
What was it like?
It was an eye-opener. I mean, you had to be very disciplined. You know, it was pretty rough because Vietnam was going on. Because boot camp nowadays is 8 weeks. Back then it was 13
Right.
because of Vietnam.
What year was that?
1970.
1970. Okay, so what do you mean you had, so in other words, you're saying, I guess your opinion is you had to bring discipline to basic training.
Yes, if you wanted to get through it easier, yes.
Okay. So what were the instructors like and how was the training? You said it was 13 weeks, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about it.
Well, the instructors were pretty aggressive.
Uh-huh.
And if you listened to them, if you answered them, you had to know your basic military commands and code of conduct and all those things. And if they asked you questions at the top of their lungs and you answered them at the top of your lungs, they left you alone.
Oh, okay.
I was a squad leader for the whole 13 weeks and the only one that didn't have issues.
During your basic training, anybody get hurt? Were there any injuries? Any casualties?
No.
No. Okay, good. So after basic training, when you went to tech school?
No, I went right to the ship.
Oh, so did you pick up? Were you trained in a specialty?
No.
No. So you went. Oh, you just went straight to a ship.
They sent me
What
straight
ship
to
was that? Wow.
The first ship was the Dixie,
Uh-huh.
the destroyer tender.
Where was that? Where?
San Diego.
Uh-huh.
I went there in 1970.
And what job did you do on the ship?
When I first got there,
Mm-hmm.
I was down in the engine room, 600-pound blower system. I was a machinist mate.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a few months, I became an engineman, went up on the deck, and I ran Mike boats. I was an engineer on the boats.
Okay.
And we ran, back during Vietnam, we ran weapons down to the carriers and stuff like that.
So once you got on the ship, did you automatically launch and go to the Asian theater?
Yes, in 1971, so probably 6 months after I got to the ship.
After you got on the ship. So tell me about that 6 months prior to leaving.
6 months prior to leaving?
Yeah, on the ship.
On the ship, I spent most of my time as an engineman. Well, I'm sorry, machinist mate first, and then down in the engine room. And I learned steam turbines and stuff like that.
Right.
And then I went up to the boat shop, and I became a diesel mechanic, which is an engineman. And I worked on injectors and the small boats. And then I was a boat engineer on the Mike boats. And then
Mike boats?
Yeah, there were Mike 6, Mike 4s. They're different. This size of boat that you take weapons and people on. It's like the personnel landers that they take and they drop the front.
So it was like 10 feet, 12 feet long?
Yeah, at least 12.
Okay, all right.
Probably
Longer?
16, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And after that, well, then we went overseas.
Okay, and what was your first stop overseas? Did you stop in Hawaii on the way, or
Yes, we stopped in Hawaii on the way,
mm-hmm.
and then we stopped in the Philippines.
Get any R&R while you in Hawaii?
A little bit, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was a repair ship, so anywhere we stopped, we had to machinery and stuff coming off other ships, and we had to repair it.
Oh, okay.
So we did that, and then we went to the Philippines. I spent 4 months in the Philippines,
Where in the Philippines?
along the Post City,
Okay.
which was interesting. And
Why is that? Why was it so interesting?
Because it was a crazy place. It was like the Wild West in Jeeps. You know, the jeepneys where they're like taxis.
Ah,
And it was just crazy. People everywhere. It was dangerous. You know, dangerous to move around. I mean, you could get in trouble real quick.
what do you mean? How?
Well, you could get robbed easily.
Oh,
They had a lot of murders.
really?
It was a rough place to be.
Wow.
And but it was an interesting place too. I mean, the Philippines was quite interesting.
Mhm.
But anyway, like I said, I was there for 4 months,
Right.
and then we went on to Sasebo, Japan.
To who?
Sasebo, Japan,
Okay.
and we were there for 4 months, 5 months, probably 5 months,
Okay.
and then
And what'd you do there?
we repaired ships.
Repair. Okay.
We repaired ships came to us from Vietnam.
Uh-huh.
We never went to. I was never in country Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
Ships.
What
came
kind of
to us.
repairs?
Engines, motors. We had a deck, so like sail. We had upholsteries. We had a lot of hull technicians. You know, welding, all that kind of stuff. And so that's basically what we did was repair ships.
Okay.
And we were in Sasebo. There's a big shipyard. So if we couldn't do it, then the ships might have to go to the shipyard, depending on the damage or whatever they had.
Okay. So up to this point, did you experience in your unit on the ship any casualties? Anybody get injured?
No.
Okay, nice.
Mhm.
Carry on. Next.
And then I got a kidney stone,
Huh.
and so they put me in the hospital in Sasebo, Japan, and my ship left.
Mhm.
So I spent the next 3 months waiting for orders to a new ship. So I was at the transit barracks in Japan, Sasebo, Japan, and I got a set of orders. Finally, so I flew back to the United States, flew into San Francisco in my dress blues.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't received very well, you know, because at that time the Vietnam War obviously wasn't popular,
Right.
and we weren't either.
Oh.
So, you know, you got hackled and people tried to, make comments and stuff like that. So
Right.
that was a little rough to go through. You know, I was 21 years old. I was a young kid. But
Were you bedridden while you were in Japan with
no,
the kidney stone? Not at all.
No, I passed the stone, but the ship had left, so I just sat and waited for orders.
Got it.
And but I traveled throughout Sasebo and all those areas. Just
Oh, you did.
Mhm.
So you got to experience the economy
It was
at
fun.
that time. How was that?
It was really interesting. Back then, you could rent a bicycle for 50 cents a day.
Oh,
And I
okay.
would ride through the countryside. It was
Uh-huh.
just really beautiful. And I stopped at a place I thought it was on fire. So I rode my bike down the hill, opened the doors, a little plywood shack, and an old gentleman was in there blowing glass. So it was a kiln that was making all that smoke. But he had no protective gear on. You know, the room was full of smoke. And he came to the counter, and of course I couldn't speak Japanese, but he was selling his goods. So I bought 2 brandy snifters, and I still have them today. And he tied them in boxes and put them on a bicycle, and I still have them. So it was pretty cool.
Okay.
And after that, though, like I said, I got my orders, flew back home. They put me, by that time, the Dixie had gotten back to San Diego. So they were going to put me on a destroyer going right to Vietnam then.
Uh-huh.
And I was just getting ready to go again. I was home for like 2 weeks. And then I got another set of orders to a minesweeper. So I went on the USS Pluck MSO 464 wooden minesweeper in San Diego after that. So I spent a couple years on that. And we went to San Francisco and all over, you know, and did mine sweeping. We would come up to Washington State and do it with the Canadians and do that kind of stuff. So we did that in 72.
Okay. All right. So what was next after that?
After that,
Were there any casualties? Anybody get hurt during that mine sweeping engagement?
we did have one person, he got injured, yes, because we were sweeping for mines and the cable on the fish, they call it, which is the fish behind the ship, which carries the cutters for the mines.
Right.
And the line got tight and it took him off the boat.
Oh,
knocked
boy.
him off. But we recovered. He was fine.
Good.
But it did knock him off, and he did get injured. I think he broke his arm.
Okay.
Other than that, though, that was it.
Great.
And then I went to Naval Ships Engineering Center at NAVC Command, 1973 to 75.
Where was that?
That was in Philadelphia.
Okay. Wow. Oh, okay.
And this is the FFG, Fast Frigate Guided Missile Destroyer program.
Uh-huh.
I was one of the original gas turbine techs in the Navy, because you had to be an engineman first and then become a gas turbine person.
Okay.
So I did that. I was one of the original 12 guys in that unit, and we started the gas turbine program. The destroyer program was ahead of us, so that group, and then we were the next ones out. So we started the gas turbine program back then.
What is that? The gas?
Combustion turbines on ships.
Okay.
So they went away from steam and diesel and went to gas turbines.
Okay, which was more efficient?
More efficient, faster, a lot faster.
Oh, really?
A lot faster.
What was the difference between old and new,
Between old and new,
speed-wise?
oh, let's see, old was probably, it's 15, 20 knots maybe,
And new?
and new you could get up to close to 30.
Okay, great.
If you knew how to trim the ship, you could do that.
Knew how to trim the ship?
Yeah, trim the propellers and stuff like that.
Okay.
It was called trim.
What did that entail? Trimming?
Oh, trimming, you just had a pitch indicator, and the pitch is the blade moving.
Mm-hmm.
So you just had to know how to do the pitch correctly, and you could get a lot more speed out of it.
Okay.
And then you could pass the alarms and go a little faster if you had to.
All right.
And then, so that was in, like I said, 1975, so that was in Philadelphia
Mm-hmm.
from 73 to 75. And then 1975, I went to Pascagoula, Mississippi. But for 2 years we went to schools, C schools, A schools, for turbines. But there was no school in the Navy for gas turbines at that time.
Okay.
So we went to Daytona Beach, Florida.
Right.
And in Daytona Beach, Florida, the General Electric company across the street from the racetrack had a big complex there, and they built the control consoles
Mm-hmm.
for the turbines and the turbines. And so that was set up we went there to learn. And so they taught us. We didn't have Navy instructors at that time.
Okay.
We were taught by the civilians.
Oh, okay.
And then we went to Philadelphia and did the land-based test site. The land-based test site, they had a control room, they had 2 gas turbines, and they had a shaft goes into what they call a water break,
Right.
so the shaft could turn. And we tested that for the Navy, and they would send people up to observe the operation of the units. So we did that, and then once that was approved, then they tore it down, and they moved the whole thing up to Great Lakes, Illinois, to the Great Lakes Training Center.
Uh-huh.
So then everything moved up to Philadelphia. Moved up to Chicago then, to Great Lakes. So anyway, so then I commissioned the Elliott, like I said, and the Elliott was a gas turbine powered destroyer.
Right.
The 5th one in the 990, no, see, it was 967, but I think they started with 963. That was the Spruance. So the Spruance class destroyers were the ones ahead of the frigates. And so I was on the 5th one of the group. I commissioned it down in Pascagoula, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And then we came through the Panama Canal up to San Diego, was our home port.
Right.
And out of that, then we would travel up and down the coast, obviously, San Francisco, places like that. In San Francisco, though, we had a casualty on board ship.
What happened?
One of our cooks,
Uh-huh.
who was from the Philippines, killed one of the guys who was on the ship. He stabbed him in the back.
Oh, why?
So I don't know why.
You don't know why?
They deported him to the Philippines, so nobody really knew what happened after that. But he was a casualty.
Wow.
And after that, in 1977, then I got off the Elliott and went to Fleet Training Group in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was a gas turbine. I made first class gas turbine tech then. And then I was a gas turbine rider, so I would go on all the ships to train. because we did war games, war training.
Right.
And so I was the one in charge of training all the engine rooms and that kind of stuff for the turbines and what to do in emergencies, how to shut the turbine off, how to stop and lock the shafts, how to do all. So I ran all of those drills at first.
What was your rank at this time?
First class E6.
Okay. And where were you during this tour?
In San Diego.
Okay, back in San Diego.
Yes.
Go ahead. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So then, in 1980, I got off active duty for a while, and I was going through a divorce, and so I decided just to get out.
Right.
So I did, and I moved. I moved to Washington State, which is where I originally am from.
Oh, okay.
And I was born in Sonora, California, but we moved when I was little. So I went back to Washington State, and I decided. Well, my uncle worked for the gas and power companies, and so he did gas mains, and they had gas turbines,
Right.
power plants.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was trained in gas turbines. They gave wiremen the book and said, "Here, read this and go run the gas turbines." So
Right.
they were having issues. They were industrial-sized turbines, and I had training, so they hired me right away, and I went up to Bellingham, Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and I ran a gas turbine power plant there, and I helped train people in the gas turbines. And then I decided to go back in the service because I had already had 10 years
Right.
active duty. And my dad told me, he said, "You're going to waste 10 years, you know?" So I decided, okay, I'll go in reserves. Well, there was no Navy Reserve in Bellingham, but there was a National Guard. So I joined the National Guard for 1 year,
Army National Guard.
Army National Guard, and I was the boat commander. They had boats. It was a bridge battalion, 86 engineers, and we ran bridges across rivers so they could drive tanks across them.
Right.
So those were 6-ton units. You know, the bridge would open up and they would run across. And so I guided the boats across the rivers and stuff because I had the experience in the Navy. And so after that, I spent 1 year. I just couldn't take it. I didn't think that
What was the problem? Go ahead.
my opinion is they weren't doing a very good job.
Oh,
They didn't have good leadership. I was not impressed.
right.
So I finished my year. I had a year that I could do. I could get out after a year, and I did.
Okay.
Went down to Seattle then and joined the reserves.
Okay.
And then I went
What was
to.
your civilian job while you were in the reserve?
I ran gas turbine power plants for Puget Sound Energy in Washington State.
For who?
Puget Sound Energy in Washington State.
Okay.
So I ran gas turbine power plants for them. And then, like I said, I went back in the reserves. And so that was 1983. So from 1983 to 1985, I was on the USS Fife, and the Fife is a DD 991. So the Elliott was an older ship, and the Fife was a brand new at that time. And so I was the first class in charge of the engineering group from the reserves. So we had it was a reserve ship, so we went aboard that every 2 weeks, every year. And so I was in charge of the engineers. And then
Up to this point, while you were in pulling any reserve and National Guard duty, were you deployed anywhere?
we were called up during a storm in the little town I lived in to sandbag the river because of flooding. So we were called to do that.
Okay.
Well, we're not there yet, but no, that was the only time I was ever called up was for that.
Okay, carry on. Thank you.
And then, so in 1985, like I said, so then I went to the USS Duncan, a FFG, a frigate, and then I did, 85 to 86, I was first class still. I had just gone up for chief, for E7. I made chief, but I didn't take it. I went to become an officer instead. So that's when I got my commission.
Okay.
Actually in 1987 I got my commission. In 1987 I was on the Tisdale again, on the Duncan. I got my ensign on the Duncan. I had 14 years enlisted. I became an officer then.
Wow.
Then I went to, in 86 to 1990, I was on the Tisdale. I became a Lieutenant JG on there. I was the first officer in the unit. And then when I was on the Esteem, I went back to Minesweepers in Seattle. It was on Pier 91. and I was on the steam, and I was the executive officer for the ship, for my unit. And I was a lieutenant then. And so we did, on the steam, we did the same thing. We went up and down the coast, we did ops for minesweepers up with Canada.
Right.
And the Canadians were using dolphins. And so we had a minefield, and they would send the dolphins out, and the dolphins would find the mines, and then they would actually hook a buoy on a mine and float, and then the divers would go down and dismantle the mines.
Wow.
So that was very interesting. We did that.
Any casualties?
No.
Dolphins either, I hope?
No, they were smarter than we were. No, they didn't have any problem with them.
Okay, good
And
news.
then I was transferred to the Safeguard, which is an ARS, a salvage ship in Hawaii.
Right.
So I was the executive officer of our unit, and I went there and to Hawaii for my 2 weeks after that. So that was interesting, and that was from 1990 to 1991. I'm sorry, 1991 to 1993.
Okay.
And after 93, I went back to a float training group as the executive officer of float training group reserve unit back in Everett, Washington at that time. They switched.
Uh-huh.
So then I stayed. I was during that time frame, the first Persian Gulf War. I was called for that, but it was
The
over.
what?
The first Persian Gulf conflict.
Got it.
I was recalled to do that, but I think the war was over in 7 days or something. So they turned us back because they didn't want reserves to go over there. It would look bad, you know. So
Right.
I was called, but I didn't have to go.
Right.
And then 1993 to 2001, like I said, I was executive officer of Float Training Group.
Mm-hmm.
I put my papers in just prior to 9/11. And at 9/11 happened, I was in Philadelphia working a civilian job. And I transferred my reserves to a base there. And so right at 9/11, like I said, I had put my papers into, so that was September. I was going to retire in December. I requested not to retire and to go overseas, you know. And I got a call from the bureau, and they said, you know, you're too old, stay home. So I didn't have to go to that conflict either.
Okay.
And then then in December I retired
Okay, so
of 2001.
how old were you then?
See, I was 60.
You're 60 years old?
Yep.
Okay. There we go. So did you permanently retire? Or did you find another job?
Oh, no, I just retired from the military.
Right, and then
Yes, I kept working.
Okay, so I'm curious, prior to the retirement, did you have a plan for getting out and continuing another career, or did you just...
I stayed in the power industry the whole time. Yes, I worked for a couple of different companies,
Okay,
but I did gas and electric distribution work. I had it designed. I would go out and walk the lines and do those kinds of things. And
so who did you go to work for when you separated, finally?
I worked for a company called Henkels & McCoy Engineering out of Philadelphia,
Uh-huh,
out of Bluebell, Pennsylvania, actually.
okay,
And I worked for them for 5 years, and I did gas and electric distribution work around the state of Pennsylvania.
okay,
After that, I thought I would get back to Arizona, closer to my family and kids and stuff, and so we moved to, I started working for Tucson Electric at the power plant up in Springerville, Arizona. And that was about 5 hours from Tucson. I thought it was Tucson Electric. I thought it was going to be in Tucson, but it wasn't.
right,
And so I went to work for them. I was the maintenance manager for the power plant, and that lasted about 3 years. And I just, because I came from the military and I expected people to actually work for what they get paid for, I couldn't do it. I was in conflict with the union. I was a union steward myself for 17 years in Washington State at Puget Sound Energy.
right,
And their contracts weren't written very well, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I went to work for a company called Zachary Industrial out of San Antonio, Texas,
okay,
and that was power plant maintenance. So they sent me to Illinois, and I did power plant maintenance out there for Duke Energy, and Zachary people did the work, but it was for Duke Energy. And then I worked for them in Princeton, Indiana, it was in Illinois, but I lived right across the river.
Right.
And then I went to work for Zachary in Amarillo, Texas, and I was in Texas till 2013, and then I got retired from doing that, and I thought, okay, we're done. We moved back to Arizona. We had a home up in the mountains, and I was home for
In Arizona?
back in Arizona.
Okay. What part of Arizona?
Up in Adasholo, it's called Springerville, Arizona.
Okay.
In
Okay.
Eden. And it was up in the White Mountains, about 7,000 feet. So
Wow.
I liked it up there. I could fish and all those kinds of things because I'm an avid fisherman. And but after that, I got laid off, and so I figured, okay, I'm 60, I'll retire. And then PPNL called me, FPNL, sorry, Florida Power and Light called me, and they said, would you come out and do gas turbine overhauls during the summer
Right.
out here? So we started coming out to Florida for about 4 years, down in West Palm, and I worked at a couple other places, and they actually even sent me up to Philadelphia to do a plant up there. So I did power plant outages, I did boilers, and I did gas turbines, and those kinds of things.
Okay.
So then after that, in 2018, I decided I was done completely and just retired.
That was it.
Yes, sir.
Finally.
Finally.
Okay. All right. Do me a favor.
Okay.
Besides the places you've already mentioned that you visited, now including any R&R, vacations, what other areas have you visited or worked in the world that you may have missed mentioning so far?
Well, visiting, I visited a lot of places.
Like?
Fiji, the Caribbean, the Bahamas, of course Canada, Mexico, Panama. I've been through the canal a few times.
Okay.
China.
Right. Okay, that's
pretty much it.
That's fine. During your military career, did you have any issues staying in touch with your family or people back home?
Yes. When I was overseas, phone call was $24 a minute.
Ooh, boy.
So we didn't have cell phones.
That was an issue.
Yeah, you just couldn't pick up a phone and call.
Right.
So I was gone for 9 months straight. The only writing letters was the only way to get back and forth.
All right, and was that consistent? Back and forth?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm laughing because when I was 19,
Uh,
I was in the Philippines, or 20, it should be 20.
right.
And my stepmother called the chaplain, and she worked for the civil service. So she called the chaplain and said she hadn't heard from me in a while. And
Right.
the captain of the ship called me up in his office, and he said, "Son, have a seat." And I've never been to a captain's office, right? I was a kid.
Right.
I just got out of boot camp,
Yeah.
And so I'm nervous, and I'm sitting there, and he says, "You see that pen and paper?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You write a letter to your mother." What? He said, "Write a letter." I'm fine, blah, 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 sent it off. Oh, yeah, I wasn't happy.
Oh, yeah.
But she knew how to get a hold of me.
You never forgot that, huh? No. Okay. Good deal. Medals and citations?
I've got a few.
Just,
Not a ton, but I have a few.
okay.
When I was in Philadelphia on the land-based test site, I was an engineman then before the rate came out,
Right.
and I got the 4th Naval District Service Command award because the boat that the admiral had, it was prior to the Army-Navy game back in, God, that must have been 70, let's see. When was that? There it is, probably 1974.
Okay.
And the admiral had to take the Secretary of the Navy to the game. Well, the boat wasn't working. The engineman had gotten in an accident and had a brain tumor, so he couldn't fix it. So he came to our office and asked our master chief. He said, "Do you have an engineman that can fix my boat?"
Right.
And he said, "Yeah, I got the best engineman in the Navy." Pointed to me and he said, "Straws, go fix his boat." I said, "Oh, yes, sir." Yeah, 2-star admiral again, right? I've never seen these guys.
Right.
So I went down to the boat. It was a 40-foot yacht. that DuPont had donated to the Navy.
Oh,
So I went down there, and it took me about 3 days to get running, and so I was about a week ahead of the Army-Navy game.
I'm curious, what was wrong with the boat?
It was pretty basic, actually. I kept trying to fire it off, and a 671 diesel I cut my teeth on in the Navy. That's how I did the injectors. I did everything. I knew how to. I could build that thing in my sleep almost.
Okay.
And I was looking at the batteries, and he had them connected incorrectly.
Oh.
So I just redid all the batteries, fired it up. Admiral Coxswain called the admiral that came down, and he asked me the same thing. What did you do? I said, sir, Master Chief said I was the best engineman in the Navy. I never did tell him how easy it was. So I got the Naval Distinguished Service Award for that. I just thought that was kind of funny.
It was. Okay, so go ahead.
And so anyway, but during my career, I got the Navy Marine Corps Commendation Medal twice.
Mm-hmm.
I got the Navy Marine Corps Achievement Medal twice. Coast Guard Meritorious Service Command Award. That was because we would come up, as a float training group, we would come up to Seattle and train the ice cutters, icebreakers.
Right.
And so our unit got an award for that. I got the Navy Engineering Ribbon, Navy Good Conduct Medal, 3 awards, National Defense twice. I got the Navy Sea Service Award. I got the Naval Reserve Service Award, Armed Forces Reserve Medal, Navy Rifle, Marksman, and Navy Pistol Expert.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. Do you feel like you had everything that you needed while you were in, during the time you spent, on active duty or reserve duty? Did the service provide you with everything that you needed from A to Z as far as living and working?
Yes.
Okay. How was the food throughout your military career?
Not the best.
Uh-oh.
It wasn't. The military really didn't care about food back in those days. When I got on, the minesweeper on the pluck, we had one cook. He would get sick in the trash can, turn around and make food. So I finally told him, I said, I'll cook. So I went in and started cooking too. He was that bad. So then, but on the Elliott, when I was on the Elliott in '75, then they started actually sending people to like culinary school for the Navy. So
Right.
it actually improved.
Okay.
It actually improved then. But when I was on the Dixie, my first ship, it was okay, but they were feeding 900 people.
Right.
So it wasn't the best.
Gotcha.
But you always got enough food. I mean, it wasn't that we starved,
Right.
but it just wasn't the best.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's see. So, where did you say you were again when you separated? The last time?
Oh, the last time?
Yeah.
I was in Philadelphia.
Okay. All right. Well, we actually have covered that already. There was another full career after the military, actually.
Right.
Did you use your GI Bill for anything
College.
during or after?
For college.
For college?
I got 3 degrees. Yeah.
Yeah. What are they in?
I have a degree in business, a degree in business management.
Is that your bachelor's or associates?
There are 2 associates.
Oh.
My bachelor's is in project management, and I got that in George Washington School of Business,
Where?
Washington, D.C.
Online or?
Yeah.
Online.
Yeah, I worked in Philly, and they paid for us to become project managers, so I did it online.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And the other degrees?
That's it, just 3.
3. So
2, a business degree, business management degree, and then the project manager degree.
masters?
No, 2 associates and a bachelor's.
Gotcha. Okay. Great. Did you use your GI Bill for anything home or?
I have for buying a home, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's my
Okay.
third one.
All right. And close relationships, camaraderie, and so on. Maintained any friendships from the military up to this point?
I do. I have a couple guys that we communicate with on Facebook still, yes.
Nice. Okay. All right. Couple more questions. Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Yeah, yes, it did. Especially the military in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think people should go to the military. I think it teaches you a lot of discipline. I mean, the training and the schools and the things that I was able to do were keeping me in business for my whole life. So I didn't have any issue with that. I enjoyed all the schools. I went to over 14 Navy schools, and all of that nowadays is college credits. And so when I went to get my degree, I had all of those credits too. So and leadership, you know, I unfortunately don't think leadership is that good anymore. From what I've seen, it's falling down. But when I was in, leadership and integrity were everything, and I don't think it's there 100% anymore.
Okay. And, well, I was going to ask you, but you just answered it. So that is your advice for young people, say either
I've
high
talked to-
school or college. You strongly advise.
And I also advise somebody like in college, you know, get your degree and go in the service as an officer.
Right.
Because I can tell you by experience, after 14 years enlisted, the rest of that time as an officer was tremendously better. I was treated better. Because I had prior enlisted also, I was respected better. I wasn't usually confronted. You know, do you really know what you're doing? You know what you're talking about? Even as a reservist,
Right.
because I worked in the industry that we would go out and train on the ships. So it was just a lot better as an officer. You were treated better. The food wasn't better, but the rest of it was good.
Okay. All right. Okay. Last question. How did your service and experiences affect your life?
I think it's affected me tremendously. I think it's you know who I am today. I still feel deeply rooted in this country. I still feel that it's the best country to live in, and I just think that's, you know, being honest, have integrity, and moving yourself forward, enjoying life. You know, I learned an awful lot from being in the military.
Do you feel like there's anything that you haven't shared with us that you'd like to share?
No.
Okay. I want to thank you for a great interview, and I also want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure.